Week 12 of fantasy football is underway. It is absolutely gut check time, fellas. This is the time to make your playoff push, secure your playoff position, get a bye, avoid your loser punishment, whatever you guys are looking to do. Hopefully, I can give you guys 10 players to help your fantasy football rosters, plus some streaming quarterbacks, streaming tight ends, defenses, kickers, and some droppable players. Let's not waste any time. Let's get right into it. Here are the guys that you need to double check your waiver wire because they are rostered in higher than 45% of sleeper leagues here. Kenneth Gainwell, we don't have word on Jaylen Warren's injury. It looked like a low ankle sprain, maybe a medial ankle sprain. He could miss this week. I'd say it's about a coin flip that he does. Make sure Kenneth Gainwell is rostered in your league just in case. We should probably get some news about that today, tomorrow, and Thursday. Devin Singletary, also worth picking up because he is the goal line back for the New York Giants, and they should get Jackson Dart back this week. At the wide receiver position, make sure you double check Chris Godwin is not on your waiver wire. He is probably going to return this week against the Los Angeles Rams, if not next week against the Arizona Cardinals. Make sure he is rostered. He could absolutely be a big piece for the Tampa Bay Bucs down the stretch. And same goes for Jayden Reed. I would expect his practice window to get opened up either this week or next week, and for the fantasy playoffs, especially both of these guys. If you're a contender, if you have 6, 7, 8, 9 wins, you should definitely be stashing guys like this on your bench. But let's get into my top 10 wide receiver and running back pickups. My number one pickup of the week is Emanuel Wilson, running back of the Green Bay Packers. He is rostered right now in just 13% of leagues, so very widely available. One of the guys that I would be willing to put a decent amount of fab down on. I'm going to trust the fantasy doctors and most reports here because it does sound like Josh Jacobs will be at least out for this week in Week 12 against the Minnesota Vikings. The timeline that a lot of fantasy doctors have given have been somewhere between 2 and 4 weeks, given that mild PCL injuries are usually at least a 2-week absence. And until that time, Emanuel Wilson will be the starter. He got 71% of the snaps in Josh Jacobs' absence. He left early last week against the Giants in the first or second quarter there. 2 tough matchups versus Minnesota and at Detroit the next 2 games. So the volume is why you're playing him here. He should be a top 24-ish play. But again, keep in mind that Josh Jacobs will probably only be out a game, 2, 3 at the most. We're not looking at a guy who is going to be a rest of season starter, I would imagine. This is a good bye week fill-in, a good early short-term pickup in case you guys have some injuries or you just need to make that playoff push and you are looking for a flex option. Number 2 pickup for me here is Michael Wilson, wide receiver of the Arizona Cardinals. As of me recording this, we have 0 update on Marvin Harrison Jr.'s appendectomy. It sounds like he had appendicitis. He got his appendix removed. That's what it sounds like happened. Most players return to action either 1 week or 2 weeks after the surgery, assuming there was no major complications. But if it's complex, he could actually be out a few games. But I would say if it was a complex appendectomy, he would have gotten put on IR last week. So there's a very good chance that he is going to either be back this week or the week after. If Harrison is confirmed out, which as of now I'm projecting, Wilson saw 18 targets, a 33% target share in his absence, and he would be a top 30 wide receiver play versus Jacksonville this week, which is why he's a top 2 ad for me, because if Harrison is back, Wilson is still a viable option. I would say a top 45 or so wide receiver play, but he's probably more like my 9th or 10th best pickup. I am basically ranking him under the assumption that I do think that Marvin Harrison will be out, unfortunately for me in the Flock League. But Michael Wilson, a good pickup nonetheless. Christian Watson, also a very good pickup this week. 2 touchdowns, a 23% target share. The Packers will not have Josh Jacobs this week versus Minnesota, and they will be likely forced to throw the football more. The Vikings are strong against fantasy wide receivers, but as of late, they've been a little bit weaker, and Christian Watson's going to be a fixture flex option rest of season, or at least until Jayden Reed gets back in a few games from his injury, given the routes that he's running and the fact that he has that big play and touchdown upside. Make sure that Christian Watson is picked up if you have an open roster spot. Same goes for Sean Tucker, who as of right now, we do not know if he's going to be a major factor in the Buccaneers backfield. They obviously rode the hot hand in Buffalo last week. That's exactly what happened. I was at the game. Rachaad White still outsnapped him, but he had 3 touchdowns and all that noise because he was the hot hand on the ground. And we don't know as of right now if Bucky Irving is slated to come back in week number 12 against the Los Angeles Rams on Sunday Night Football. If I had to make an educated guess based on his injuries, everything I've heard from doctors, being a fan of this team, knowing what I know about Todd Bowles and how he talks about injuries, I would say that he's going to be a true game time decision on Sunday Night Football. He is probably going to get ramped up and log a full practice at some point this week, whether it's Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. If it's Wednesday or Thursday, I would expect him to play. If it's Friday, I would say he's probably going to be a game time decision. The issue is the shoulder, not the foot. The foot has not been an issue for weeks at this point in time. He shed his walking boot before the bye. He was expected to not go on IR because it was just the foot injury that he was dealing with at the time that they were going to place him there. But the shoulder is what he needs to know. Can he take contact? Is he going to be ready to go? It's a bad matchup. The Rams allowed their very first rushing touchdown of the season last week to Kenneth Walker. So this is not a good matchup for Bucky Irving. If I was Tampa Bay, I would hold him out for one more game, knowing that Sean Tucker and Rachaad White did a good job in his absence, and you have an easy stretch of games come week 13 on. But I mean, this is an important NFC game. It could be important for playoff seeding and whatnot. If you can get Godwin and Bucky out there, you could definitely do some damage in this matchup. Moving on to my number 5 pickup here, Bam Knight. DeMercado suffered a high ankle sprain by all reports. We're looking at a multi-week absence there. Trey Benson is eligible to come off of IR at any point in time, so Trey Benson could be activated early in the week this week, and we could see Bam Knight not be a usable option at that point in time because Trey Benson is now going to be the starter or whatnot. But as of right now, we don't know if Trey Benson's coming back. And Bam Knight was robbed of a long touchdown. To be the starter, to be the lead ball carrier means that he will be a usable option. It was a very negative game script, so he played a low amount of snaps, and Michael Carter was heavily involved. But Bam Knight did score 14.5 fantasy points. Given that long touchdown run that got called back, it could have been even more. He could have had 25 plus fantasy points in that game. But keep in mind that if Trey Benson is back, he is probably not a guy that you want to pick up. So monitor the news reports from now until whenever your waivers run, whether it's tomorrow or the day after. Darnell Mooney is my number 6 pickup here. London is projected to miss this week versus New Orleans, and potentially, similar to Jacobs, up to 2 to 4 games based on the reports I've seen. Darnell Mooney himself also got banged up in last week's game against the Carolina Panthers with a rib injury. So something to monitor there as well. If he is not going to be ready to go, then he's probably not worth picking up. But assuming he's healthy, and it doesn't sound like the injury was major, Mooney has been much better with Kirk Cousins over the last 2 seasons than he's been with Michael Penix. And Kirk Cousins is now going to be starting for the rest of the season because Michael Penix suffered a serious knee injury, and he had 12.1 PPR points per game with Kirk Cousins last season, wide receiver 3 in fantasy in points per game. And the Saints, Jets, Seahawks, and Bucks is a pretty favorable stretch of games. If you need a wide receiver to play this week, he might be less appealing because he's kind of banged up right now. But for the next couple of games, especially over the next month or so, if Drake London is going to be missing some time, I think that Mooney is one of the best 2 to 3 week options out there, depending on what you're looking for. If you need a 1 week play, Michael Wilson, Christian Watson, probably better. But if you need a 2 to 4 game play, I think Darnell Mooney probably a slightly better option than those guys. Number 7 pickup for me is Bhayshul Tuten, running back of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's splitting carries early on with Travis Etienne. He looks great, and then he suffers an injury that could be a high ankle sprain. So again, be careful dropping a lot of fab on this guy because it's possible that he could be out for a number of games here. But keep him on speed dial because he's a great handcuff. He looked really good. Etienne's primary handcuff who has a standalone role. So if Bhayshul Tuten is available and you can get him for very little fab, go ahead and do that. Just keep in mind he may have suffered a high ankle sprain or at least an ankle sprain of some kind. So you don't want to go crazy dropping a bunch of fab on the guy. Number 8 pickup for me is a great 1 week fill-in. Andrei Iosivas, wide receiver of the Cincinnati Bengals. Jamar Chase is suspended, right? He spit in the face of Jalen Ramsey or on his jersey or whatever versus the Patriots this week. They are a top 5 fantasy wide receiver matchup. And Iosivas has been a solid fill-in whenever T. Higgins or Jamar Chase has been out of the lineup. Before the bye, he posted a top 13 scoring week. And last season, T. Higgins missed 5 games. And in those 5 games, Iosivas scored 3 touchdowns in those games. So he is definitely a usable option, very widely available. If you guys lost Jamar Chase or if you have guys on bye like a Ladd McConkey or whatever, you could definitely throw him out there and you could definitely be worse off as well because he's getting the routes. Joe Flacco's throwing like crazy and the Patriots defense is susceptible to the pass. My number 9 pickup here is Xavier Legette, also a pretty good 1 week fill-in, but I do think he could have some upside going forward. The Panthers did something different in week 10. They started to move their receivers around. We heard Dave Canales talk about it with Teteroa McMillan, but it also affected Xavier Legette as well. Not only that, but they actually really trusted Bryce Young to throw the football, and boy did he. 440-plus yards, Legette and T-Mac looking like the first-round wide receivers they were billed to be, both of them finishing as wide receiver 1s on the Week 11 slate. Whatever they did against Atlanta, hopefully they continue to do it, and hopefully they continue to let Bryce Young throw the ball versus San Francisco. This week is a top 15 wide receiver matchup for the Carolina Panthers receivers on Monday Night Football, so if you need a 1 week fill-in, I do think that Xavier Legette is a decent option to go after, assuming the injury that he suffered in that game is not serious, and he is practicing this week, which I expect him to. A couple of stashes for those of you guys, let's say you have 6, 7, 8, 9+ wins, and you're just looking for a bench stash, a guy that you don't have to use right now. Luther Burden is a great one. First game above Olamide Zaccheaus in the routes. This was the first time in which he played in 3 wide receiver sets over Olamide Zaccheaus. So that's good news going forward for Luther Burden. He was a bit of a raw prospect, very young. We didn't see rookie year Amon-Ra St. Brown break out until week 13. So it's possible that Luther Burden and also Jayden Higgins, who is my other stash here, as rookie wide receivers who were both second-round picks, top 6 or 7 prospects for me in my wide receiver rankings before the draft. Jayden Higgins, second on the team in routes in back-to-back games. So these two guys are kind of peaking at the right time in terms of their overall usage. We'll see what happens in terms of production, but definitely worth stashing over the stretch run if you guys are in a winning position. Moving into the streaming quarterbacks of the week, first and foremost, if Brock Purdy or Joe Burrow are available in your league, make sure to go and pick them up. Brock Purdy coming off a nice game in which he was a top 12 quarterback versus the Carolina Panthers on Monday Night Football this coming week. He is definitely a great option, knowing that Ricky Pearsall is starting to ramp up. Brandon Ayuk not expected to practice this week, but I would say for the fantasy playoffs, he should be back in time for then. It is now 13 months removed from his injury, so he should be coming back at some point. Of course, Kittle doing his thing, McCaffrey doing his thing. This 49ers offense is good, and Brock Purdy could be a solution for you down the stretch if you need a quarterback. Jacoby Brissett, more likely streamers here versus the 29th ranked Jacksonville Jaguars. Jacoby Brissett set the NFL completions record last week by throwing for 45, 47 completions, something like that. They are letting him throw the ball like crazy. So if they're going to let him throw that much, then he is going to be a very viable fantasy quarterback. Same goes for Trevor Lawrence in the same game. It's possible we do get Brian Thomas Jr. back for this one. And of course, Jacoby Myers still ramping up. Parker Washington has been involved. And it's also possible we get Brenton Strange back this week, who is coming off of an injury back in week 5. He was eligible to play last week, but he didn't quite make it up in time for that game, and Trevor Lawrence does run the football a little bit, so if you do need a quarterback, he's not a bad option. Same goes for Bryce Young. I mean, 31 fantasy points against the Falcons last week. He does kind of own the Falcons. Let's keep that in mind, but the 49ers are not a hard matchup by any means. They're 24th against fantasy quarterbacks. Bryce Young, if they're going to let him throw like that, because they primarily had been relying on Rico Dowdle to that point, if they're going to let him uncork it to T-Mac and Legette and all those guys, then definitely somebody that you can start out there as a streaming quarterback if you're missing Justin Herbert or somebody who you might have on bye there. So moving into Theo Johnson versus the Detroit Lions here. He is my top streaming tight end of the week. Dart is still in the concussion protocol, so even if Jameis starts, I still think that Theo is getting great usage and getting a great target share. 4 of his last 7 games, he's been a top 10 tight end in fantasy, and 21% of the team's end zone target share on the season. So Theo Johnson, kind of a touchdown or bust option, but he is athletic, and he does have some reception and receiving yardage upside. So if you need a streaming tight end this week, I think Theo's not a bad option. Number 2 streaming tight end, I have A.J. Barner of the Seattle Seahawks versus the Tennessee Titans this week. They are 14th against fantasy tight ends, 10 receptions last week. Darnold and him have a good connection. Season high 80% of the routes, the most he's played all year. And he really kind of has alphaed Elijah Arroyo, who they spent a second-round pick on this season. So that's great news for A.J. Barner. If you want to pick him up, he's definitely a viable streaming tight end. Again, if you have Gadsden on bye or something like that. Mason Taylor, also a viable streamer as well. At the Baltimore Ravens, they're 21st against fantasy tight ends. Tyrod Taylor is now starting. In the 2 games that Tyrod Taylor was primarily the quarterback for, the Carolina and the Buccaneers game, 5 and 6 targets for Mason Taylor. Tyrod will throw the ball a little bit more and is trusted to throw the ball a little bit more by the Jets coaching staff. Both of these games also featured Garrett Wilson, who's not in the fold in the lineup right now, who's on IR with a knee injury. So Mason Taylor, wouldn't shock me if he caught 6-7 passes in this one and made for a good streaming tight end. Moving into the defensive and kickers, here we have the Seattle Seahawks at Tennessee. They're my number 1 defense for the week. Baltimore versus the New York Jets. Cleveland at Las Vegas. Green Bay versus Minnesota. Las Vegas at Cleveland in that very same game. That could be Shadur Sanders starting. Could be a hobbled Dylan Gabriel or a concussed Dylan Gabriel potentially. New England at Cincinnati, my number 6 defense. Detroit versus New York against potentially a Jackson Dartless Giants offense. Jacksonville at Arizona. San Francisco versus Carolina on Monday night. And the Los Angeles Rams versus the Tampa Bay Bucks. If they have Bucky Irving and Chris Godwin back, I probably would bump them out of my top 10 and move up, the Falcons versus the Saints, although Tyler Shuck did look good in his only start so far. The kickers that we are looking at here as top matchups. Brandon Aubrey versus Philadelphia, Chris Boswell at Chicago, Cairo Santos versus Pittsburgh, Tyler Loop versus the New York Jets, Jake Bates versus the New York Giants, Jason Myers at Tennessee Titans, Chase McLaughlin at Los Angeles Rams, Cam Little at Arizona Cardinals, Harrison Butker versus Indianapolis, and Jake Elliott versus the Dallas Cowboys. As far as players that you can drop to pick up some of the guys that I talked about today, I think Bill, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt is droppable. They're on bye. He's basically been alphaed by Chris Rodriguez. You can drop him. Isaiah Davis, Brashard Smith, Calvin Ridley's now out for the season, Hollywood Brown, Shamiri DK, Calvin Austin, Jalen Naylor, Darius Slayton, Olamide Zaccheaus, Kendrick Bourne, Tyler Lockett, Cade Otton, Dawson Knox, Luke Musgrave at tight end, Joe Flacco, Justin Fields, Aaron Rodgers, Mariota, Penix, and JJ McCarthy at quarterback. So that is the waiver wire for week 12. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like down below, subscribe. If you got some value from this channel, I'm sure we can help you out for the rest of the season if you guys are new around here, or just double check to make sure that you are subscribed, because a lot of you guys probably watch and don't even know that you're not subscribed. We really appreciate you hit that. And of course, rest of season rankings up to date. Weekly rankings will be undergoing some construction here for the Week 12 slate today, tomorrow, and Thursday. Matchup charts available as well. Dynasty trade value chart, dynasty rankings, all of that stuff available over on flockfantasy.com. Make sure to check that out. That'll be linked down below in the pinned comment. Flockfantasy.com, promo code FSE gets you a 7-day free trial. Try out all the tools, check out all the rankings, the My Teams feature, the calculator. Before you get anything, this is the actual best time of the year to be purchasing an annual subscription as well, because it would cover you from now until the end of the season, into the Dynasty rookie offseason, and into pre-draft stuff next year, best ball time, and of course in the beginning of in-season content next year. So check that out if you guys are interested. But with that being said, peace out, and I'll talk to you soon.